My mother-in-law, who was fine until yesterday, has passed away. It was all so sudden. She was a kind person to me, a bit playful and adorable, far from the stereotypical mother-in-law from hell often depicted in YouTube videos. Mom, why did you have to go so suddenly? I mourn her as if she were my own mother. However, despite it being during the funeral, a rough voice could be heard coming from beside me. It's my right to get a share, isn't it? What? You're challenging me, the eldest son? My mother-in-law had 4 sons, including my husband Scott. None of them seemed to mourn her. They were all seriously discussing the inheritance at the funeral. I just wanted them to send her off with warmth and respect, but when I spoke up, I got rebuked. You're after the inheritance too, aren't you? Can't you see we're discussing something important? Outsiders like you should stay out of this. It was shocking. Perhaps he spoke out of anger, but still, to be spoken to in such a way by my husband. While feeling suspicious of them, I hastily sent off my mother-in-law. And then, 7 days later, after the inheritance was divided, my husband and his brothers, having lost interest, stopped visiting their family home altogether. In their place, I went to put flowers, cleaned the neglected house, and took care of the beloved dog that my mother-in-law had cherished. While cleaning the doghouse, I heard a rustling sound coming from the back. Becoming suspicious, I pulled it out, and something appeared that shouldn't have been there. My name is Kelly. I'm a working wife, juggling a career and household responsibilities. People say I'm a bit unique because I'm a magician. Ever since I was taken to a magic show as a child, I've been enchanted by the joy and surprise that magic brings to people. I was lucky enough to learn from the magician I admired. I believe I was able to bring smiles to various people, including my parents, by learning and practicing various things from my mentor, including the mindset towards skills and professions. Magic is my pride. Virgil and I got close through a magic event company and got married. At first, my husband used to compliment my magic tricks, saying things like, "You have amazing talent," and "It's your true calling." But gradually, he started making disparaging remarks about my work, saying things like, "It's low paying, and anyone can do it." Despite both of us working, I'm left to handle almost all the household chores. The relationship with my husband started to get a bit rocky. Where had the kind man who delighted in even my simplest magic tricks gone since our honeymoon days? Despite Virgil's demeaning comments about my profession as a magician, his mother, my mother-in-law, always praised my magic, which was a great comfort. I never met my father-in-law, as he passed away from illness a few years ago, but my mother-in-law had been incredibly warm and kind since I first met her for our introduction. She always looked out for me and had kind words to share. She would beam with joy more than anyone else when I performed magic tricks. Since the moment I met her, I've adored her and often visited her home even after getting married. She had a big family, with 4 sons including Virgil and 10 grandchildren. She lived with the eldest son's family. They once welcomed a cute, large breed puppy, but as the dog grew, they started neglecting it, except for my mother-in-law, who took great care of it. Whenever I visited, I would help with brushing and walking the dog, and it eventually grew fond of me. I've always loved animals. Especially loved dogs, and now it warmly welcomes me every time I visit, which I find incredibly adorable. I used to have great chats with my mother-in-law about the dog, but the eldest son's wife once told me not to come over so often as it was a nuisance. I realized that frequent visits from an outsider could be bothersome and decided to refrain from visiting for a while. Although this distanced me from my mother-in-law for some time, after having 2 children, our interaction resumed, albeit not as frequently as before. Are you heading out? Yeah, didn't I tell you? I'm busy with work since I got promoted. Are you going to your mom's place again? Must be nice to be free like that. Okay, have a good day. His sharp tone made me want to argue, but I held back my words. Virgil was often away due to work, and we rarely visited his mother's house together. One day, my mother-in-law invited me over, saying she bought some snacks. Your birthday is coming up soon, isn't it? What would you like this year? I appreciate it every year, but now that I'm turning 60, I don't really crave material things anymore. Wait, you're turning 60? Hey, don't say it so loudly. I mean, I already have lots of grandchildren, so I guess I'm a respectable grandma now, huh? Let's celebrate. I'll organize it. I'm sure everyone will want to make it a big celebration. Oh, really? Do you think so? My mother-in-law was hesitant, but she seemed somewhat bashful about it. After returning home, I immediately called my husband's brothers. But none of them or their wives seemed enthusiastic about it. Even my husband was indifferent. "What's that about?" "I'm busy, you know." "It's just a birthday party, right? You started this, so you handle the preparations," he said coldly, leaving me feeling downhearted. Somehow, though they wouldn't help with the preparations, Virgil's brothers and their families agreed to attend the party. I didn't want to disappoint my mother-in-law, so I put my all into getting everything ready for the big day. "All right, it's perfect." While my mother-in-law, whom I had sent to a nearby cafe with some money, was away, I decorated the house and prepared the feast. As Virgil's brothers and their families arrived, not one of them brought a gift or even thanked me. My husband was no different. I didn't expect thanks for organizing something I took upon myself, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being unappreciated. Even before my mother-in-law returned, they started to dig into the food and drinks, and I had to stop them just in time. "Oh my, everyone came to celebrate?" She was delighted to see her sons and grandchildren all gathered. She laughed heartily at the new magic trick I performed with the kids. "Thanks to Kelly for organizing today's party," she said with a smile as we washed the dishes together. After the party, when everyone left without helping clean up, and the eldest son's family retreated to their rooms, I felt a bit miffed. But seeing my mother-in-law happy made it all seem worthwhile. "See you later, Kelly." She waved goodbye with a smile as I left late in the night. Little did I know, that would be our last exchange. When I got home, I found a letter in the mailbox. The contents made me feel a bit exasperated that nobody had bothered to send anything for my mother-in-law's birthday. The next day, while my kids were at daycare, I decided to return the containers I had used to bring home leftovers from the party. I felt an odd sense of urgency that morning. No one answered the doorbell. It seemed like the house was empty. As I was about to leave, I heard the dog barking in the yard. What happened? I found the dog's chain tangled around it. After freeing the dog from its collar, it dashed straight to the window of the veranda. Through the window, I saw my mother-in-law lying on the floor in the living room. "Mom!" In a panic, I rushed around to the front door, which was thankfully unlocked, and hurried into the living room. My mother-in-law's beloved dog was desperately barking next to her, lying motionless as if crying for help. I immediately called an ambulance, but it was too late. My mother-in-law, who had been healthy just the day before, had passed away from a stroke. My heart was filled with a sense of loss, but there was no time to grieve as I hurriedly contacted family members. Soon, the funeral came. My mother-in-law, who had 4 sons, was not mourned by any of them. Throughout the funeral, they only seemed seriously interested in discussing the inheritance. Despite my suspicions about them, I placed a photo from the recent 60th birthday party inside her coffin and hurriedly sent her off. I expressed my desire to put flowers in the vase next to my mother-in-law's photo, and the eldest son's family begrudgingly let me into the house. I invited Virgil, but he just said, "I'm busy," and couldn't join. From the balcony, I could hear the dog whimpering sadly, whine. The eldest son's family didn't want to care for the dog, so I negotiated to look after it in the mornings and evenings, fitting it in between childcare and work. In a little while, I'll negotiate to take the dog home with me. I thought to myself. Today, with some extra time, I was cleaning the neglected doghouse and discovered something stuck to the ceiling inside. It was hidden from outside view. Curious, I peeled it off. Perhaps to protect it from getting wet, a fancy envelope in a plastic bag. Inside, a note in a pop font read, "A gift for the person taking care of the dog." Open the trick box. Another paper included a map with "Here's where the trick box is" written on it. It seemed like a joke meant for kids. Although I could have ignored it, something made me curious. The usually calm dog barked excitedly, as if encouraging me to look. Following the map, I started digging in the indicated spot. Could there actually be treasure buried here? As I was lost in thought, digging, the dog joined in to help. Soon, a trick box emerged from the ground. It seemed like a child's toy, but was quite tricky to open. Thanks to my experience with sleight of hand and magic, I struggled but eventually managed to open it. Inside, there was a letter addressed to Kelly and a small key. The letter explained that the previous note was made to look like a joke so that my money-minded children wouldn't take it seriously. The note stated that the hidden location of the safe, which contained items not to be found, was written down. Apparently, she had been planning and preparing for quite some time before she passed away. Furthermore, the letter revealed that her eldest son and his wife, along with Scott and his other brothers, had been borrowing money from her, leaving no inheritance in the house. She wanted to leave something for me, who had been kind to her, and instructed me to pretend I didn't find anything and accept this gift. Following the map, I found the safe and opened it with the key from the trick box. Inside were several pieces of jewelry, including diamond rings and necklaces. I didn't know the value of these sparkling diamonds, but I was touched that my mother-in-law had left something for me. However, I couldn't help but cry, thinking of all the things I still wanted to do with and for her, now that she was no longer in this world. I decided to honor her last wish and keep this discovery a secret from Virgil and his brothers. Then, my phone rang. It was Virgil. Hello? Hey, you need to be there for the inheritance discussion. It's the day after tomorrow. Bye. Hey, wait. He said abruptly, and the call ended. After that, he didn't come home, and I reluctantly went to the meeting. There, all of his brothers and their wives were present. Seeing the bank books and metal items on the table, everyone sighed in disappointment. The eldest son, Scott, incurred huge losses in the stock market. The second son, John, spent a fortune on extravagant affairs, and on top of that, my husband Virgil loudly complained in front of everyone, "I'm struggling because my allowance is too small." The wives of each brother all looked at me at once, but this was the first time I had heard such a claim from my husband. "No, you spend most of your earnings yourself, ouch." I began to retort, but was interrupted by a sharp pain. Virgil had pinched me hard on the back. Feigning ignorance, he continued to lament about being broke. "Anyway, I have no money." Despite the pain, I couldn't help but think something was off. Afterwards, the second son, John, who had started a business, was struggling with debts, and the fourth son, Gordon, had a hobby of collecting cars and apparently needed money for that. It turned out that everyone, each for their own self-made reasons, was short of cash. They had all begged my mother-in-law for money during her lifetime, leaving no substantial savings to be called an inheritance. This revelation led to an ugly exchange of insults and blame that was too harsh to be made public. It was a good thing I had left my children with my parents. Had they been there, I would have deeply regretted it. The brothers shouted at each other, and their wives did nothing to stop them, instead joining in. My attempts to calm everyone down were ignored. Afterward, someone suggested, "We have no choice but to sell the family home," but everyone agreed, "Even if we sell it, it won't bring in much money. She was a useless old woman. What does she think we lived together and took care of her for? At least do something useful for your children in the end." I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my hands down on the table. Everyone was shocked, and the room fell into complete silence. "What are all of you saying? It's shameful. Talking about money like this. How can you speak ill of such a kind woman? It's terrible. Don't you have any heart?" Everyone was stunned by my outburst, but my husband grabbed my shoulder tightly. "Hey, you're not involved in this. Don't butt in. If you're gonna keep yelling, just go home," he said angrily. But I stood my ground and shook off his grip. "Fine, I will go home. And while I'm at it, I'll leave a divorce paper and leave for good." He looked baffled, not understanding what I was saying. "What? Are you serious? Don't make a scene here. Do I look like I'm lying? I'm serious." My decision to divorce wasn't spontaneous. I had been contemplating it for a while. And recent events solidified my resolve. I looked at my husband with an unwavering resolve. My husband realized I was serious. "Why, what happened? Is it because your beloved mother-in-law is gone?" "It's not just that. We can't settle this here. Let's go home." That day, the meeting ended abruptly, and Scott and I returned home. Back at home, just the two of us, a heavy silence filled the room. Sitting across the dining table, Virgil looked utterly confused and defensive. He took out a beer from the fridge for himself, popped the tab open, and began to drink. Sensing unpredictability from him, I discreetly switched on the voice recorder I had hidden in my pocket earlier. It might come in handy later. "So? Why did you say you want a divorce? Have you lost your mind?" "I haven't lost my mind. I told you, I'm serious. You know the reason better than anyone, don't you?" "Huh? I hate it when you beat around the bush. Just tell me the reason, straight up. He slammed his half-finished beer can on the table. Unfazed, I calmly responded. I got a call. From a woman saying she wants to marry you and for me to leave you. His face changed in an instant. Someone you're getting along with? Her, right? Yes. Your mistress. She's very young, isn't she? I was surprised. Her syrupy, immature voice had called my cell phone. The news was a shock, but it also made sense. He had become distant after we got married because he had a mistress. Without me asking, she gushed about their romantic escapades. Day trips, stays in hotel suites. I couldn't help but question her nerve for telling all this to his wife. However, as she spoke, I decided to gather evidence of the affair. I started recording midway through the conversation. Furthermore, by expressing envy like, I've never stayed in such a hotel, I'm jealous. I'd love to see it, and flattering the mistress, who was reveling in her superiority, she surprisingly ended up sending me photos taken with my husband in a suite room. Photos that showed a lot of skin, even going to the extent of mailing them to me. Though I was filled with disgust and anger, I was glad to have solid evidence. She called a few more times, happily telling me how my husband spent most of his weekends at her place, paid her rent, and showered her with expensive gifts. Things he never did for me and our children. So much for his complaints about having too little pocket money. His busy work excuse was mostly a lie. His late returns from work and weekend duties were all excuses to spend time with his mistress. Pretending to be oblivious, I once called his office on a day he claimed to be working overtime. Of course, he wasn't working, and there was no promotion. In fact, he had been absent without leave, causing trouble at work. You neglect your duties, drown in a woman's arms. What are you doing? It's pathetic. You called my office? That's a violation of my privacy. My husband, with his face turning bright red and spitting in anger as he shouted, was quite an unsightly sight. Don't be ridiculous. If necessary, I'll have your office testify. You could even be sued by them for your unauthorized absences. What? And with no raise, how can you afford to pay your mistress's rent and lavish her with brand gifts? Did you use the money you begged from your mother for your affair? Damn it, I don't want to be lectured about how I use my money by a stranger like you. Fine, let's get divorced. I'll marry that young, cute, and kind girl. I'm sick of you, a charmless nag with kids. It'll be refreshing to be rid of this burden. He was infuriated, but I calmly presented the divorce papers I had previously obtained. I've filled in my part. Will you sign? Sure. He furiously wrote his name and stamped it. I'll file this. I'll contact you later about alimony and child support. Get out, get out. I carefully put the divorce papers in my bag, left the house without looking back at Scott, and headed to my parents' house. At my parents', they warmly welcomed us. The kids were happy to live with their grandparents, and our lives were filled with more laughter and joy than before. I devoted myself more to my work. One day, while everyone was out and I was alone. After finishing chores, I was relaxing on the sofa watching recorded TV shows when the doorbell rang. Without checking properly, I casually opened the door, hi, and it was Virgil. I realized my carelessness too late, the damage was already done. I saw his menacing face as he blocked the door with his foot. It's been a while, he said, looking down at me. What do you want? Receipts for jewelry purchases made by Mom surfaced. What? The jewelry found at the family home was all fake or cheap. I think you might have the real stuff. Huh? I haven't received any expensive jewelry like that. Really? Maybe you sweet-talked my mom into buying them for you. I would never do that. I'm not like your mistress or your brothers. Really? Then show me around the house. What? I told you I don't have it. Hey, wait a minute. Ignoring my protest, he barged into the house. Stop. I rushed to stop him, but he pushed past me and started rummaging through drawers and shelves. He must have been looking for the jewelry my mother-in-law left after her death, hidden in the trick box. Oh, this must be it. He found an ornate jewelry box and his eyes sparkled with greed. That is. As he opened the box, boink. Whoa. From inside, a realistic toy snake sprang out forcefully. It was something I made for a magic trick. It was too realistic and unpopular among audiences, so it was never used. Scott recoiled in surprise at the toy snake, and I had to suppress a laugh at his foolish appearance. What the hell is this, Kelly? Are you making fun of me? Of course not. You're the one who opened it. Damn it, you're playing games with me. The item Scott was searching for was now safely stored inside the trick box in the safe. He continued his search. And eventually found the trick box. What's this, a toy? However, he quickly lost interest and started looking elsewhere. I breathed a sigh of relief that he didn't find it. Where is it? He yelled in frustration. Just then, a stern voice cut through the tension. What are you doing here? It was my father. Surveying the chaos in the house, my father, who practiced martial arts and was quite intimidating, angrily said, "What's with this mess? This is breaking and entering." Virgil, who had always been intimidated by my father, hastily stammered an apology and fled like a flash of light. Sorry. After explaining the situation and apologizing to my father, he was more concerned about my well-being, asking, "Are you okay? Did he do anything to you?" Later, when my mother returned, the three of us cleaned up the room and went to pick up the kids. I later heard from my lawyer about Virgil and his family's current situation. The brothers had searched everywhere for the expensive jewelry they believed my mother-in-law had bought, but of course, found nothing. He still suspected I had it and even mentioned it to the lawyer during a visit, but the lawyer firmly stated it wasn't with her, and Scott seemed to finally accept it. He had lied a pay raise, and spent most of his time at his mistress's place. His work attitude worsened, his performance dropped, leading to a demotion. Frustrated, he quit his job amid a recession. Unable to afford his mistress's rent and gifts, he became completely dependent on her, and she eventually grew tired of him. The end of the money marked the end of their relationship. Despite her earlier boasts about their love, she had no intention of supporting Virgil indefinitely. I'm also suing the mistress for damages, as there's ample evidence against her. There's an abundance of evidence, so there's no way they can talk their way out of it. Virgil's brothers, who had relied entirely on my mother-in-law, were now constantly complaining and fighting over the inheritance. It seems that my lawyer has also been receiving inquiries about divorce from my husband's other brothers. The lawyer, due to professional ethics, has no intention of taking their cases, but it seems that several of the other brothers are likely to get divorced soon. Following my parents' advice, I had the jewelry from my mother-in-law appraised. The largest diamond ring turned out to be worth around $50,000. Surprised, I decided to heed my parents' advice to use it wisely. I plan to give some of it to my children and the many innocent grandchildren of my mother-in-law when they are older. I believe she would be happy with that decision. As for me, I have a dream. Once my children are older, I want to tour the country and delight more people with the magic that my mother-in-law loved so much. I hope she watches from heaven. And if she could watch my magic tricks from up in the sky and smile, that would make me very happy. And then came a joyful bark from my family, all animal lovers. After leaving the house, I was always worried about my mother-in-law's dog, which I had left behind. Although it was wrong, I secretly visited and took care of the dog while the eldest son's family was away. The dog, nearly neglected, was overjoyed to see me. My lawyer managed to negotiate with the eldest son's family, and surprisingly, they agreed to give the dog to me unconditionally. They no longer had the means to care for it. I thought they might demand money for the dog, so I prepared some just in case. However, it seemed that the eldest son's family no longer had the capacity to even care for the dog. Today, I officially welcomed my mother-in-law's dog as our family pet. The children were ecstatic, petting the dog, which rolled on its back, wagging its tail as if it would fall off. I silently vowed to my late mother-in-law I would take care of the dog until its end. Looking up at the sky. It is cloudless, expansive blue sky. Today was a perfect day for a walk.